Hey everyone, please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show. So I've been slowly making my way through the Guide to the World of Greyhawk over the last few months, and that's what I'm going to continue to do today on Greyhawk Grognard. Okay, so picking up where we left off in the Guide to the World of Greyhawk, mine of course being separated from the cover after many years of long use, we start off with the Bone March. And this is actually a place you can see here on the map behind me. It gives an interesting note that the leader is called His Nobility the Marquis of Bone March, title currently held by no one. And that's important because the whole idea of the Bone March is it is a formerly human land that has been overrun by humanoids. Now, just going through the stats here. The capital is Spine Castle, which in later sources is kind of like a semi-ruined town. Population is 40,000. Almost no demi-humans except for a few in the Flinty Hills. Humanoids many. Gnolls, ogres, orcs in numbers, and they do have resources of gems and silver. And it gives a history. When Kingdom of Verity became an empire, they wanted to stop the threat of the northern barbarians, the Sul barbarians, the Frusti, the Schnai, and the Krusti. So they attacked overland. They basically broke the Frost barbarians at what's called the Battle of Shamblefield. In here, it says that it happens when the Great Kingdom became an empire, which is not a very, it's not really a nice date because that's very subjective. Later on, sources nailed it down to 108 Common Year, which would put it at 470 years before current, roughly. So this battle of Shamblefield with 10,000 barbarians and a huge army of the Great Kingdom. Basically, the Great Kingdom drove away the barbarians and conquered that whole part of the Flanaess. They set up the Bone March because they named it after all of the remains of that big battle. Many years later, in 560, which is 16 years before the guide is published, so it's very current in the minds of everybody. Humanoids, orcs, goblins, ogres, gnolls began making forays in, and only 3 years later, the whole land fell to the invading humanoids. The human population was enslaved or slain, and the humanoids there now can raid into North Province. They go across the river. They go into the Pale, into Radek and Nairon, going through that line of hills and such. Although they can't. That is, as this says, perilous because of all the gnomes that still live in the hills there. So, you get the idea that there are some beleaguered colonies and towns of gnomes that are still trying to fight back. Now, we do get a lot more detail about what's going on in the different humanoids and how the North Province treats them and so forth, the battles. In one of the News from the World of Greyhawk articles from Gary Gygax in the and Rob Kuntz in the 80s, where it details there's 3 major alliances of the tribes and so forth, and it gives some numbers and such. But one interesting thing I see here, There is continual border warfare along the Tisar Torrent and in the Blemu Hills of Erides North Province, although some say that the Overking would gladly make peace with the humanoids to the north and enlist them in his own army. So there we see there's some conflict between North Province and the Great Kingdom, because the Great Kingdom just wants to bring in the humanoids as allies. But North Province, because it just, from their perspective, it only happened 13 years ago that they lost this huge territory. So they want to recapture it. So they want to defeat the humanoids and recapture the lost lands. But the Overking is more interested in just swelling his armies. So I like that they put in that little tension between the two of them there. Next up, we've got the kingdom of Celene. This is a very different prospect. This is an elvish kingdom. It's the kingdom that is south of the Cron Hills, which is where the village of Hamlet is and the Temple of Elemental Evil. It's that elven land that's kind of carved out between the mountains and the forest there. It's got a human population of 20,000, and it's got a whole bunch of gray elves, sylvan elves, gnomes, halflings, no humanoids, and they produce food and cloth and a little silver, probably from the mountains and the hills. There is a really cool interlude in I believe it's Artifact of Evil, the second one of the Gord the Rogue books, that takes place in Celene, in the capital of Enstad, on Midsummer Night, when there's a big revel going on. So if you have access to that book and you want a little more flavor for what's going on in Celene, that's a great place to go. They don't welcome strangers, even though they're good. So they're very much of an isolationist thing, isolationist place. And you see this carried through in later works too, where they don't really get involved in the Greyhawk Wars, and they don't really do much to fight against Ayus and so forth. They really want to stay isolationist and involved in their own problems. The realm is friendly with the Ulek states, and an alliance between Celene and these countries was responsible for the hateful wars. Basically, those four countries banded together to drive all the humanoids out of the mountain range that lies between them, and that's how the Pomarge got started, because they drove all the humanoids out of the mountains and they all went into the Pomarge. But it was ultimately effective. A small number of humans and half-elven folk dwell in Celene, many serving in its military, for continual warfare is carried on in the Sus Forest and beyond the Jewel River with the Pomarge humanoid tribes. So the humanoids of the Pomarge haven't forgotten that they were driven out of the mountains by, in large part, the elves of Celene, and so they're continually raiding back from the Pomarge through the forest there. So you really get that impression, which is really cool. Next up, we have Dyvers. And Dyvers is a very important city in the campaign world. It never gets like a full-on treatment like the city of Greyhawk does, but the city of Dyvers is this is the rival to Greyhawk. It's the one that's a few hundred miles, maybe 100 miles to the west of Greyhawk. It's just as much of a metropolis. It's not as big as Greyhawk. It has a population of 42,000, whereas Greyhawk has 58. So it's in the same league. But it's it's really set up as a commercial and cultural and military rival to Greyhawk, and I think that gives you some insight into the very early stages of the Greyhawk campaign before it was even published. Is that you have these city-states more than anything else, and the kingdoms, the organized large kingdoms that control lots of land, are kind of on the periphery of the of the campaign setting. So you have Greyhawk, and then you have swamps and mountains, and then you have Dyvers, and you have this kind of unclaimed forest land. Then there's the wild coast, and having these rival city-states in there kind of promotes this idea that the politics in that early form of the campaign, in the very center area of the campaign setting, it's all very small scale. It's all very local, and I kind of like that. In real world terms, I think Gygax once said that where Greyhawk is Chicago, that would make Dyvers like Minneapolis or something, which is an interesting real world thing. I might be getting the exact ones wrong, but like the two city rivals that are not too far away from each other. I kind of like that idea. Let's see, Dyvers and their resources are shipbuilding supplies. So that's what they do, is they service the ships that are coming down the Velverdiva River. It makes it an important trading center and busy port, with lake and river traffic coming from as far away as Perrinland, the Pale, Ten, and even occasional missions from Ayuz, which is an interesting thing. Some history stuff. The city declared its independence in 526. So the city was actually part of Furiondi until about 50 years ago. And it was at that point when it broke away. At the same time, a couple other things were happening in that area. Thrommel II allowed it to pass unchallenged, which is, gives you an idea of the kind of political situation in Furiondi, is that they're because they're a good aligned state, and they've seen the bad example of the Great Kingdom. They're kind of more willing to let local populations kind of break away and do their own thing. And they have land beyond the city, some 2,000 square miles. The free city boasts a marine force of 1,000 men and an army twice as numerous. They are very well armed and equipped. So, again, reinforcing the idea that they are a maritime power. They sitting at the mouth of the Velverdiva River, which is the big river system in the northwest Floness that goes into the Neardive. Controlling all that commerce and traffic and stuff, it puts them in a very great position. And finally, we have, for today anyway, we have Ekbir, the Caliphate. His sublime magnificence, the Caliph of Ekbar, population of 250,000. So we see out in the west, the populations kind of jack up a little bit, which is consistent, as we'll see in other Baklunish states. Ekbir is one of the Baklunish states in the northwest part of the Floness. Ekbir is the strongest city of the Bakluni in the Floness. Very interesting. They confirm that it is in the Floness in here. It's not just that the Floness ends at that mountain line. Some of the Baklunish states really actually are considered to be part of the subcontinent. And that's been a kind of a point of contention over the years. The original, founded by survivors of the invoked devastation, the small port quickly grew. The original village grew into a walled town and then a thriving city and so forth. The forces are light medium cavalry, and they have a standing army of about 5,000. Now, the one thing I've always thought of in terms of Ekbir is that because of the title of Caliph, that makes me think that they have at least a claim to the overlordship over all of the remnants of the Baklunish people. And I say that because in the real world, the Caliph is kind of like the overarching suzerain of the Muslim community, the Muslim populations, and I would expand that and use that as a model in the world of Greyhawk. So, even though the other countries in the Baklunish lands don't probably recognize that, that might give an insight into the political situation that's happening within the Baklunish lands. I don't have it on the map here because my map gets cut off. But it's also interesting to note that it's not just the way this is phrased is that it's the Ekbir is the city, but it also has a relatively large land around it with an enormous population, 5 times the population, no, more than 5 times the population of the city. So, even though it considers itself a city-state, and that's the capital of the Caliph, it does have that kind of hinterland around it, and we see a lot of nomads and stuff. From the Baklunish lands are also found there. So So anyway, hope you enjoyed this one, going through it slowly but surely. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.